a lone pioneer in an entire country. So he and I really did plan and prepare this project together. And so this session isn't going to be one of those sessions that's just about, here's a cool project I did, which I am going to share with you the ins and outs of the project, but really with the lens of thinking about what collaboration brings to the classroom and what having that authentic audience piece brings to student learning, and how you can set up structures for success that are going to support kids in an endeavor like this. So of course, in terms of bringing a project like this to your classroom, I know sometimes we're in a situation where we have to offer some justification or background decision criteria, I guess, in terms of offering something like this to our kids. So certainly we do have the grounding in the Common Core for thinking about how we're going to offer students opportunities to author collaboratively and to work together and publish together, including using the internet to do so. But more importantly for myself and Ingvi when we were planning this project was that our students had questions. Our students had curiosity about the world. Our students were wondering about one another. And specifically, this partnership sprang out of the fact that our third graders at Burley were doing an inquiry unit on the tundra. And as they were doing their research, they realized that a lot of what they were finding was about people and about life in the tundra was historical information about native peoples. And so this is a really important lens to look at this land and at this biome, but they weren't really making a personal connection to it. They weren't really having that opportunity to say, what is life like in a region like this for a kid like me who's in school? And so when we realized that our students were having all this curiosity, it was a great opportunity for me to reach out to Ingvi, who, as I said, I knew from a prior visit to our school. So as we sat down to plan this and to really think through how we wanted to approach our collaboration, first and foremost in our mind was our students and their curiosities and what they needed. And so as we sat down to plan this, we went beyond thinking about just the students to really think about the nature of collaboration and the nature of global connectedness. And to ask ourselves questions like what makes a student want to learn and what makes a student able to learn. And of course, one of the answers to that question for us is meaningful engagement and authenticity and really having a purpose for your writing, for your work, for your research, and really bringing that to our students in a powerful way. How can we foster student curiosity? We know that kids dig in more to the content when they're actively wondering and questioning and thinking about what it is they want to learn and what resources are available to support them. And so we really wanted that curiosity element to come alive through our collaboration. Why is connectedness important? Why is life better when we learn with other people? We can ask ourselves that same question here at ICE. Why do we come here to learn with other people? Why aren't we just sitting at home on Twitter, which I know we're always doing in the background, also many of us. But why is it important to learn with other people? And again, Twitter is an opportunity to learn with other people. And what do we get from that process? Really helping kids think that through, and what does it mean to be learning with others? And what role can and should technology play in that? How can technology help us reach out to other people and give us that sense of connectedness with one another? And then in a bigger framework, what is our obligation to young people in a connected world? As we're living somewhere where people are more and more learning with other people at a distance, collaborating at a distance, the world is becoming more and more interconnected every day. How are we going to begin to scaffold those types of experiences for our kids, even as young learners, so that they're prepared to enter the world in which they're going to live the rest of their lives? And so we sat down and thought about all these things. And of course, we both are big fans, Ingvi and I, of the SAMR model by Dr. Ruben Puentedura, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with. This is a model for looking at the different levels of technology integration in your classroom. So it starts with substitution, which is the lowest level, where you're essentially using technology to do the same work you were doing before. So you might have had a worksheet you passed out previously, now you have students filling out a Google form. You might have had students practicing with math flashcards, now they're doing an app instead. And I would certainly never say that those are bad uses of technology or those are wrong uses of technology. We use Google Forms all the time to make our lives easier and more efficient. So I never see this as a judgmental phase. I see it as somewhere to understand where you're using different levels of technology and when you want to reach for that redefinition level, which is where we were really reaching with this project. And so the redefinition and modification levels are called teaching above the line. It's when you're really reaching out and doing something that you could not have done without the digital tools. And in that way, not only making the most of your technology investment, because let's face it, if you're just doing flashcards with your iPads, you're really not making the best use of a $400 device. But sitting down and thinking about what new learning do we need to be offering to kids, and what new learning do we now have this amazing opportunity to offer to our kids. And so as we were working on this, we said, well, okay, we feel like we've got the redefinition thing covered, right? Because kids from Chicago and Iceland to even meet one another, well, we couldn't do that without technology. To be able to communicate and share and not just put stuff out there for one another, but also to connect and have that feedback coming back and have that two-way conversation. To be able to think and wonder together about how we can learn about each other's homes and to be able to collaborate and create together. Clearly, these are all things that we knew we couldn't do before we had our devices in our classroom. But we weren't really sure how we wanted to get started. And so we knew that in terms of collaborating in our own classrooms and in our own schools, students cannot collaborate successfully together until you've built community. And since that's true face-to-face in the classroom, we knew that would be true at a distance as well. And so we used KidBlog as our tool for our students to get to know one another and to really build that sense of a learning community at a distance. And we did start out really simply. We started off with kids introducing themselves to one another. Hi, my name is Lovely. I live with my mom, sister, brother, grandma, great-grandma, and my great-grandpa. And I go to my dad's house. I have 3 dogs and a hamster. Again, this sounds like your pretty typical stuff that a kid would say when they're meeting a new friend. And then having those comments come back from our friends in Iceland where they were able to introduce themselves. So we started with just this sort of basic level. Who are you? What are you interested in? What's your life like? We started with structure. So we were, at the beginning, exchanging the same type of work. So I knew Ingvi's class was going to post a pic collage on their blog for us. We posted a pic collage back for them on our blog. So just building that sense of, it also kind of really built trust, I think, to have the same types of information going back and forth. Because just implicitly for the kids, to be able to say, okay, we made ours, oh look, they made theirs, it built this sense of commonality and sharing and collaboration and coordination in a way that I kind of wasn't expecting, I guess. I didn't expect that, I was sort of like, oh, I don't want to have this canned collaboration where it's like, it's Pic Collage week, it's iMovie week. But that actually turned out to be a really solid starting point for the kids that ended up really supporting them, I think. But along with that, we wanted to make sure we were embedding instruction with the kids about being communicators online and expressing and sharing ideas. Understanding who your audience is and what your purpose is. What do I want them to know about Burley School? How do I want to share with them what's special to me about my learning environment? What do I want to tell them about myself? What's too much to tell them? How am I going to choose what it is I'm going to share with them and what's the best way to show that? So these are all questions we all consider as authors and as communicators. So really explicitly modeling these kind of questions for our kids and helping them make really good decisions and really building their sense of themselves as authors and communicators and collaborators. This culture of collaboration and respect was so important. Of course, when you ask kids, what kind of comments do you think we should leave on our blog? The first thing they say is, oh, you have to be nice. And so it's true, you do have to be nice. So we talked at first about how can you be friendly and positive and supportive. And when you start there, of course you get a lot of comments where kids go through other people's posts and they say, great, awesome work, cool picture, love your drawing, great colors, cool. And that's not a bad place to start, but in my opinion, it's a very, very limited type of online interaction. So we really wanted to push beyond that and have kids understand that when they are dialoguing with other students online, they really need to be extending the thinking and continuing the conversation that's been started in the post. So we were really careful to model for the kids, what does it mean to connect to someone else's ideas? And we were able to draw on strategies from reading comprehension and from other types of work and say, can you ask a question? Can you make a connection to what they said? What details can you notice? You really want to show the bloggers that you're responding to that you read their work, that you paid attention, that you noticed, that you cared. It really starts to feel hollow, even for a kid. After a while, imagine if your boss came by every day. Well, this might actually sound like a dream world, so maybe that's a bad example. But if your boss just came by and said, great work, keep it up, and you're like, I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to improve. You're all at the ICE conference because you're those kind of educators, right? And so if you're just getting these sort of platitudes in response to your efforts, after a while I think it actually has the opposite effect of motivating people. I think you really have to be able to say, wow, I really love how you zoomed in on your photograph so I could notice that detail about your classroom. Or I'm really wondering about the animals I saw in your photograph. Are you allowed to bring pets to school? This was a real question that our third graders had when they saw baby chicks in the classroom in Iceland. They were actually kind of envious about that as well. So we did go through, just at the very beginning, these are some anchor charts I used with the third graders, just to even talk about communication. Why is it important to learn with other people? Why is doing a turn and talk in your classroom helpful? Why is doing a group project or having a book discussion meaningful to you? And so the kids came up with all of these responses on that left-hand anchor chart. Well, communicating with others is important because they can teach us something new, or I can teach them something new. I have an opportunity to share my expertise when I work with other people. We can share ideas. Learning becomes more fun and interesting. And so we had this really interesting conversation, as I was mentioning earlier, about what it means to learn with others and why that's a really important piece of who we all are as learners. Then we talked about this feedback piece again. We want people to know that their feedback is it should help you think about your work. Yes, it should make you feel good, but that's not your stopping point. And so from there, we talked about the communication, we talked about the feedback piece, and then we were able to say, okay, so how are we going to not just give feedback, but really engage in a conversation about ideas? And that's really where we wanted our students to get to. Did we totally accomplish that in our first year as blogging buddies at a distance? I will tell you we didn't. This is a learning process for us too, where we're trying to figure out how to best facilitate and foster the type of interaction we want to see. But I can tell you that the third graders who had this experience last year are approaching their blogging in a much more sophisticated way this year in fourth grade. And so as it builds on itself throughout the grades, we're hoping to graduate students from 8th grade at our school with a really sophisticated sense of what it means to truly be a partner in an online collaboration. So showing patience and support for one another was also a really important piece of building this community. Kids, I think they're actually helping when they point out somebody else's spelling mistake, but it does not make the blogger feel so good. So we had a lot of kids saying, you didn't put any periods in your blog post, or, hey, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And I did a lot of coaching to try to help the kids see, you could ask them a question about what they shared. The purpose is communication. The purpose is, did you understand what they're saying to you, and can you talk about their content? Your job isn't to judge them or to notice those details. I'm glad as a reader you are noticing details, but that's not the purpose of our communication with one another. So we talked a little bit about patience and support, and again, focusing on the content, not focusing on little details like that. I already mentioned this, but using comments to really make sure you're continuing a conversation about thinking. And this was a big issue once we started blogging with Iceland, is to make sure that students understood how to react to something that was surprising or unusual or unfamiliar. And so I invented a little term for this for myself, which I didn't share with the kids, but it's proactive surprise management. Because kids will be really surprised. I had a funny conversation with my colleague about this once. He was going to be using a resource online about different animals, and one of the animals, can I say this while we're streaming, was the wild ass. And so the kid, he was sitting there saying, I think most of the kids can handle the fact that there's a wild ass on this webpage, but I'm not sure all the kids can handle that there's going to be a wild ass, and I think it's going to get very disruptive in class. This is not the presentation about how many times I can say the phrase wild ass, but the purpose of this story is we talked about how can you prepare kids for this so it doesn't derail your lesson. How can you prepare kids to manage a surprise like that? And so I was remembering that when I saw Amy's students post before my students did, because I said, there are some things here that they're going to notice. The students' Icelandic names are so different from ours. The students, they dress a little differently from how we dress. So how can I prepare them to be curious about that, to ask questions, to be excited that they're learning about a culture different from themselves before they have that knee-jerk reaction? And that doesn't mean that I think students have negative reactions to things or that students are bad people. It means they're kids and they have strong reactions to the unfamiliar, where they're like, that's a weird name. They don't mean to make fun of somebody else's name, they're just not sure what to do. So we talked before they saw the Icelandic blogs about, hey, they live in a totally different place from us. What can we expect we might notice is different? When we see something different, that's an opportunity for us to learn more about them. That's an opportunity for us to ask a question. That's an opportunity for us to wonder, why does everybody's last name in Iceland end in dottir or son? Why is that the case? The kids noticed that and they were like, that's so strange. They all have kind of the same last name. Well, they have patrilineal, or I don't know how to say it, but their names are named after their father or their mother. And so if you're a girl, your last name ends in dottir. If you're a boy, your last name ends in son. And it was such an interesting way for them to just say, it never occurred to me that someone could be named differently. So really being explicit with kids about what it means to encounter someone who's different from yourself and to approach approach them with respectful curiosity and with wondering, rather than with this automatic sense of discomfort at the unfamiliar. And you can obviously see that that's a lesson that I'm hoping will serve them well in their entire lives. Safety. So one of the rules we have at early school is we don't let kids post a picture of themselves with their name ever. This is just an agreement we make with the families, and we say, look, we don't want someone to be able to approach your son or daughter on the street and say, hi, Carolyn, because they've recognized their face and their name online. And so even just small opportunities to talk with the kids about digital citizenship and about safety are woven throughout an experience like this for the kids. And so we really always, anytime kids are doing a blog, anytime kids are doing Edmodo, we have them use, there's an online me creator, which I'll actually post in the session resources. I don't think I put that on there. My colleague Todd Struther found it. He teaches technology at Burley also. And so the kids go in and they design their little pictures, and that way they're able to personalize without compromising their safety or their privacy. And this is something also that makes the families really a lot more accepting, families who are a little more hesitant about online collaboration, to know that we've thought of these details and to know that we're really doing what we can to protect the students' privacy. Some students, as you can see, made artwork in Keynote instead, and so that's always an option as well. So then we had gotten to know each other. We had this nice community going. Everybody's starting to wonder and be curious and share and learn about each other's country. And so we weren't sure what we wanted to make. And actually, the idea for what we ended up making came from this very room at last year's ICE conference. Were any of you guys at Wes Fryer's keynote last year in here? All right, so Wes Fryer, during his keynote, shared a book by Jane Ross in Indonesia. I don't know if you remember it, but if you don't, I'm about to show you a clip of it, called Our Batak House, and it was a bilingual ebook created in Indonesia with some really young children, and this is how it looked.
This is our house. Iyan masakyan namin. We go inside. Hani masuk to sopo.
So this was a book that was made, Book Creator, which is an app for the iPad that I enthusiastically and without reservation recommend. It is an absolutely amazing multimedia authoring tool for students to make ebooks. And this was viewed in iBooks on the computer, so you don't get that nice page-turning effect. But if students read this on a mobile device, it shows the pages turning, and it's a very comfy, hands-on book reading experience. But of course, you're able to embed the audio. You can also embed video in these books as well. And so because I had seen this here at ICE, we decided that writing a collaborative ebook in that way was going to be something that we could do, something that we were excited about. We liked the idea of the bilingual aspect, and even though this was showing one location, we realized this was the format in which we could easily show different locations and occasions 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 and occasions. Wonderful list of categories that the students were really interested in comparing photos about. We deployed our student photographers through the trusty method of a flyer that we sent home in their backpacks, where we said, hey, we need photos of these different categories. We need photos of homes. We need photos of transportation, pets, houses, all these other things. And we used, I'm actually not sure how Ingbe collected his photos. We use Drop It To Me, I use Drop It To Me to have the parents upload photos to me. And if you haven't ever used Drop It To Me, it's a really handy way to have work from anyone show up in your Dropbox without giving them access to your Dropbox, which is key. So the parents would go to dropittome.com/ I can't remember what was on there, and then they entered a password, and then they could upload those photos directly. And so we had them easily accessible because I was able to share that folder with kids to browse through the photos also. So it was a great way to collect the pictures. We took turns editing the book creator book. We sent the file back and forth through Dropbox. I'll explain the nuts and bolts of how that works as well. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna do that right now, cool. Okay, so The cool thing about Dropbox and Book Creator is that they play really well together. They are great buddies. And so it's very, very easy to take something you're working on the iPad and Book Creator, drop it in a Dropbox, have somebody else pick it up, and then bring it to their device to work on. And so what we did is we started in Dropbox.com and set up a shared folder. So we created a new folder first, and then I had to invite Ingvi to the folder. So it's really easy to do. You just go in and you put in their email address and tap share folder, and then you can see that you can create a folder that has 2 people on it, which is your cue that this is now a folder that multiple people can access. It's been shared with a collaborator. So once we had the shared folder set up in the Dropbox, we were ready to collaborate between our 2 locations. And so the way this looks in Book Creator is when you go to that share arrow, one of the options, and I apologize if this is iOS 6 graphics, we have not been allowed to update to iOS 7 yet in our district, so some of my information might look a little old, but that's just because that's how we are in CPS. All right, so no commentary necessary. All right, so, and you can go directly to open that file in Dropbox, which doesn't mean you're going to open it and work on it in Dropbox, it just means you're going to send it to Dropbox. And so obviously it's important to make sure that the destination is that shared folder that you set up. So you can go in and choose the desired destination, and then once that shows up in your destination spot, it's going to go to that space so that your faraway friends, and again, whether they're far away in Iceland, whether they're far away in Kankakee, whether they're far away anywhere, it doesn't really matter where they're located, whether they're down the hall in your building. This is a great way to have a book that you are authoring with others at a distance. So we added our content, we dropped it in the shared folder for Ingvi's kids to pick up. They went and picked it up, and then they added their content. They left it back in the Dropbox for us, and we just went back and forth with this routine until we had a beautiful finished book. One important element is that when you download these from Book Creator, when you download the file from Dropbox, it's really making a copy on your iPad. So you've got it up there in your shared space, then you bring it down to your iPad to work on, but the original is still there in Dropbox. So some good housekeeping for collaborating with Book Creator in Dropbox is after you download the book to work on it, either delete that original file, or if that makes you nervous, move it to a folder called Old Versions. And then that way you have just the current book in there to pick up, because it'd be really frustrating if you went and added all your pages to the book that wasn't the most current version. So we had our finished book, and we knew, again, that in terms of making this a really authentic piece for our kids, we didn't want to just make a book and then sit together on the rug with the kids and read it. We did do that. It was important. They wanted to see their published work. Their published work was so beautiful. But we really wanted this to be a teaching piece. We wanted the kids to say, hey, I made something where other people can learn about what life is like in Chicago and also what life is like in Iceland. So we had our finished book, and we were wondering how we were going to get it out there to an audience. So we started with just syncing it to the devices in our classrooms. And so this is a really easy thing to do. You just sync it through iTunes or whatever syncing method that you have, and then every kid can actually hold their own copy of the book, browse through it, read it, ask questions, do their own wondering, talk to their neighbor about what they notice. But we wanted other people to be able to read it as well. So when we put it in Dropbox, one of the other cool things about Dropbox that I think is sometimes an overlooked feature is that any file you have has its own link that you can share with anybody. So once it's in Dropbox, you can actually make that a public resource that you can share with other people. And so what we did, we started again with our tried and true method of the parent flyer, which is often a great way to reach our parent community at Burley, by making a tiny URL. So we took that long Dropbox address that Dropbox gave us, and we made a cute, easy to remember URL where people could download the book. This is still live today, so you can definitely download the book if you'd like to read it or share it with anyone back at your school. We also posted QR codes around our school so that as people came to visit, we could say, hey, do you have a phone? Do you want to read our international book? Do you want to learn about our friends in Iceland? Scan this code to download our book. And we made that at qrstuff.com, which is just a really easy QR reader. Yeah?
Could you just show the website one more time?
Yes, and all of the slides are...
The one for your book.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, tinyurl.com/farawayfriends. And of course, with the flyer we sent home to families, we also had to let them know how to read this file. It's not going to just pop up on their computer because it is an EPUB. So they do have to have iBooks to read it, either on their computer or their device, Or in Chrome, they can download the Readium extension. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other ways to use, to read an EPUB. So if you did a little research on EPUB readers and figured out one that would work well for your school community, those are the ones we usually recommend to our families. We also knew that we could take this link and have kids post it on KidBlog and Edmodo. So once you have that Dropbox link, again, you can share it anywhere you might otherwise share a link, and really think about what's the best way for me to reach out to other people and have them experience what we wrote. This is something we haven't done yet, but we know we can do it, and we're actually working on a second round of collaboration this year. I'm not working with Ingvi, I'm working with a teacher in Canada and another teacher in Belgium, and so we're trying to expand into this triangular collaboration, but to take the finished product and actually publish it in the iTunes store. That's where you can find Jane Ross's book, in the iTunes store, and so this is another great way to reach a broad audience for your students' published books. The key thing, in my opinion, is to make sure that whatever it is that your students create does find that audience beyond your classroom, that other people are able to read and experience what your kids have created, so they can really experience that sense of expertise. So this was our finished book.
These are homes. These are pets.
That's the infamous picture that inspired all the questions about the baby chicks. Why don't we have baby chicks at Burley? Why do they get to have baby chicks? That's not fair. We want chickens. Miss Skibba, come on. We need some chickens. I was like, I think we're missing the point here, friends. But you can see that these are all categories that students would brainstorm as things they're wondering about. They know their dog's important to them. Do the kids in Iceland have? Sorry.
These are friends.
And I'd be remiss if I hadn't recorded my very favorite audio in the whole book. I love that little musical touch they put in there, so I've decided that I might Skype in those cute kids from Iceland at the end of every presentation so that they can just let everyone know when it's over and end it on an amusing note. So you can see, even just paging through that book, it was really simple. The format was really easy, but it gave the kids so much to wonder about and talk about. But also, fascinated in the Icelandic language. I've never heard anything like it. Their phonetics are clearly so different from ours. I'm so interested in the fact that they have the horses there as a piece of transportation. Trust me, that was something the kids in Chicago asked a lot of questions about. And so even though this whole project had sprung from student questions and student wondering, it also led to more questions and more wondering. And that to me is something I'm so passionate about as a teacher, is when students know that the learning isn't finished, that they've created this and it wasn't like, okay, book's done, let's all move on. They continued to have questions and things they wondered about and things that they would go home and research with their families and things that they would go home and tell their parents about. One thing we didn't include here, which actually in retrospect we should have, is traditional foods. Because of course in Chicago we could have had our hot dogs and our pizza. Apparently, and this may change your idea about moving to Iceland, even though they do have super short school years and school days, but apparently a very traditional dish there is rotten shark that's been buried in the sand for months. I know. I see your face out there. It's like, I know. The kids, but again, that was a moment where we had to say, okay, we all find that a little disturbing, but tell me more about that. Why would that be a delicacy in Iceland? Is it hard to get fresh food there? Is that a way to preserve food? So we spiraled our initial reaction of disgust and horror into what was a very interesting conversation. Disturbing for me personally, though it was. It did sound kind of gross. All right, so one of the things, so again, as I said, we're doing this again this year, but in a different way. Amy's actually off at graduate school, so he's not available to do a partnership with us. So we reached out and I found these other collaborators. One of the things I really wanted to work on was improving the flow of that getting to know you phase. We struggled a little bit because I teach both third grades for technology at my school, and that meant that I had 60 third graders. He had about 15 to 18. He had a nice small group. So in terms of having students blog and comment for one another, it was really burdensome if his kids were going to leave comments for all of our kids' individual blogs. It's just not realistic. It was too much to ask. And so we ended up buddying up our kids and having them blog jointly. But again, that wasn't ideal for the kids either because they wanted to share their own info. So one of the things that we're trying this year is to, instead of doing the individual kid blogs only, we have a shared blog that, again, we've just recently started. This is usually a project we start after the holidays. And so I wanted all the kids to be able to write on this shared blog. So what I did was we set up Padlet pages. So again, I brainstormed with the kids and I said, what are some of the different kind of things you think they're gonna wanna know when we introduce ourselves to them? Well, they probably want to see our classroom. They probably want to know what makes our school special. They want to know all about our school. They want to know what we're like. They want to know what we're interested in. And then they probably also want to know a little bit about our city. So we set up these different Padlet pages and had QR codes for them all around the classroom so that kids could go and scan them. And if you haven't used Padlet, I'm so excited about Padlet this year because it's such an awesome way to have all the kids contribute content in one space. Padlet used to be wall wisher and it used to work kind of hinky on the iPad, and Padlet works great. It's just a web page, it's not an app. And so when you set up pages at Padlet.com, you can set it up so that only people who have the link can edit, and then you can close it down so you can share it publicly without the risk that anyone else is going to add onto it later, anyone who you share it with. And so you can see how it looked, and it was really very engaging and pleasant and visual. Kids could choose to make a diagram, they could choose to make a collage, they could choose to take a photo or do a drawing, whatever it was they wanted to do to share some aspect of what was special to them about our school. And then each student was able to post. And so again, rather than my partner students having to navigate through all of these individual student blogs, everybody's contribution appears in one space and in a way that's really visual and appropriate for the young kids. We're also always trying to think of ways to get over the language barrier. Obviously with our friends in Canada, this isn't an issue. But with our friends in Belgium, their kids are learning English. And so how can we make something very visual and very engaging for them, even if they're not able to read our text or comprehend it? So that's one thing that we're trying this year. We do still have the students' individual blogs, and so in those spaces, kids are posting their own information about themselves personally, photos of the classroom. We're starting to make some video trailers about our school, and those will be shared both on the shared website and on the individual student blogs. So really just offering multiple pathways for the kids to connect and trying to be really flexible. I think the school in Belgium has time to do this about once a week, and so they're going to be checking in on our whole class blog. But the group in Canada has a lot more time, and they're also to devote to this, and they're also bloggers themselves. So they're very familiar with kid blog, and so for them to go in and navigate through our student blogs is really easy for them and to leave comments. So these are some of the things, the blog posts the kids are including. This is something I don't think we did as well as we could have last year that we're really aiming for this year. As I was saying, the students are working on trailers, but really varying the media that we share with one another. We did, I think, a wonderful job last year. The kids made these beautiful drawings and they made these they took really interesting photographs and were very purposeful about that. But what's next? How can we continue the conversation about communicating with media so that we're achieving that goal while also achieving the goal of portraying a richer picture for our friends who are far away? Aiming for shared inquiry and more authentic publishing. So this is the biggest reach that we're undertaking this year, and I'm very excited to see how this comes out and to share that. I'll be sharing that virtually and on Twitter when it's all done. What we want this year is not to just have the cultural exchange piece, which again, it was very rich and it was very purposeful last year and it did help kids understand the tundra, but we want to see what it takes to have students far away actually learn together about a single shared topic that they care about. And so next week, we're going to be collaborating with the kids to brainstorm what are some issues in the world and in your community that you care about. What are some things that you wish could be changed in the world, and looking for commonalities. And so maybe we're going to end up doing inquiry about endangered species in all of our locations, or about health or hunger in our different locations, or about violence, or about the environment. I'm not sure what's going to come out of this, but we're really, again, always looking for that space where kids can really be engaged in meaningful, authentic, purposeful collaboration. And the way we're planning this year is to have students not just get to know one another and exchange about their cultures, but to really explore a topic around which they can do some advocacy and publishing. So I'm very excited for that next step in development and see how that turns out. And so again, we really want students to work together to advocate and to understand the global connectedness around caring about and then taking action around issues that are important to them. So if this is something you're thinking of trying, here's some questions just based on my experience that I would recommend that you ask yourself before you start. Obviously, any technology work, you want it to start with your learning objectives. It's not about making something cool and cute that you can share with one another. It's about thinking about what is it that I want my students to achieve and what new skill and knowledge and understanding am I hoping they're going to attain through this project. Even if even the project that we did, we were able to really talk to students about their writing and about writing for an audience and writing for a purpose. And so a cultural exchange alone is a wonderful opportunity for students to elevate the audience in their writing, which for young kids, just this idea that I'm not writing for a school exercise, I'm writing for somebody to read it. I'm not writing to get a grade, I'm writing to tell somebody something about myself and to really share with these other people in this back and forth exchange. And I think that alone is really transformative for kids as writers. So I'm not saying what we did last year wasn't adequate or wasn't sufficient or was too low to aim. I'm just saying this year we want to see how far we can go. And so thinking about those learning objectives up front with your teaching partners far away. What's our timeline? We struggled with this a little bit because, as I mentioned, Ingvi had much shorter school day and school year than we had. So how much time can we devote to this project? And how much time each day and week can we spend? Right now, our friends in Belgium, as I said, they can communicate about once a week. And our friends in Canada have a little bit more of an ongoing relationship with the blog. So how is that going to look with your different partners? What are we going to make? And again, I strongly recommend that you make this decision with the students, but also, what do we have the skill and technology and time to make? So if Book Creator, I was talking with some teachers the other day who said, well, we can't install apps on our iPads in our school or district, which to me is a really short-sighted approach for a district to take. And if you're in a district like that, I'm so sorry, because I think the ability to find and offer students the best tools that you know are going to meet their learning needs is a critical piece of a successful technology integration. However, even if you are in a setting like that, it doesn't mean you can't do something wonderful with your kids. Even if they just make shared Padlet pages, that's a web page. So you can go on that web page. Every iPad has Safari, so you can still go to that page and have your kids authoring with Kids Far Away just by sharing that Padlet link with one another. So not having that app isn't necessarily a deal breaker for anybody. I do think it's important to think about sharing and to say we're going to make something cool and we're going to enjoy it. What's next? Who is this for? How could experiencing what we created shape or affect an outside audience? How are we going to get it to that audience? Asking yourself those questions. What tools are we going to use? Again, what's available to us? What's realistic? What do we have confidence in? And then how can students take the lead in making some of those decisions? Our kids, since we do have a 1-to-1 iPad program in first grade, and then we have 1-to-2 in second grade and third grade, this is not their first time using iPads. By the time they get to third grade, they really can take a very active role in saying, well, I would love to make a movie for them. Well, I don't want to make a movie, I was hoping to make an animation. Well, can't I make a screencast? I want to take a picture of our classroom and then draw arrows to different things I'm telling them about. Of course, you can do all of those things. But also, having students take the lead in terms of what kind of content you're going to share and really giving them that role to think through those questions for themselves. Will our collaboration be whole group, pairs, or something else? What's going to work? Again, this year, as I was describing, we're taking more of a whole class approach, but also offering the individual collaboration opportunities. So thinking through how are you going to make sure that students are getting feedback and feeling that sense of satisfaction and connectedness in the dialogue that you're having with your faraway friends. How will the process be differentiated? We certainly have some students at Burley who are not writers in third grade, and this is not the best way for them to communicate with their faraway friends? How can we offer them opportunities to take photos, to record their voice, to create a video? How can we use the accessibility features of the iPad to give them full access to their classmates, to their faraway friends' blogs, as well as to their classmates' blogs? So really thinking about making sure all students can participate in this type of sharing. And then how much structure is appropriate for our students' ages, abilities, and needs? I'm always looking for opportunities for student leadership. That doesn't mean the students are always ready for student leadership. So how much am I going to need to say, today everybody's making an iMovie trailer. Today everybody's making a pic collage. And at what point are they ready to step forward? And so just really being attentive and tuned in to how your students are progressing. And sometimes they can really surprise you if you give them that leadership opportunity. But also, it's okay to know when your group's not ready. If this is their first time collaborating in this way, you may have to take small steps that are a bit more teacher-directed. But always being mindful of that gradual release of responsibility. How can we have students begin to take more ownership over this process and really begin to develop their own sense of themselves as digital learners? Oh, this is a good one. How well do I tolerate the unpredictable? So my friend in Belgium disappeared for 2 weeks, and I don't want to say disappeared like something horrible happened to him, but he just went radio silence for 2 weeks. And thank goodness I hadn't told that. This was before we started. We had everything planned, but we didn't have anything on the agenda for expecting comments or anything. So I didn't have to deal with a bunch of heartbroken 8 and 9-year-olds. But I was kind of concerned about him. And it turned out he came back and he said, oh, hey, sorry, I was out doing some PD for a couple of weeks and I was pretty busy. And so we just kind of had to roll with it, of course, because things like this do happen. But you should be prepared that, especially if you're planning with somebody who's far away, we did as much planning as we could up front and we agreed upon dates. But things happen. You know, things happen at your school. Next week we have ISAT testing. I'm not going to see the third graders at my normal time. So we're not going to be leaving any comments. And just being prepared to build in some flexibility, as well as leaving enough time for these delays, pitfalls, and challenges that are very likely to arise. And so one of the things that we struggled with a bit with the project with Ingvi was that, again, their school year ended in the middle of May, and while you might think that this is a sales pitch for teaching in Iceland, it actually caused a little bit of stress and dismay for us, because that was around the time we had planned to publish our book. And all of a sudden, he was faced with all these end-of-year schedule changes at his school, so it was kind of a scramble at the end to finish it. So just, again, being clear about how much time you think you're going to need, and then adding on a little bit more and being prepared for that. And of course, to me, the most important question is, does this project mean something to us? What is this going to offer to my students that is unique, beneficial, or important? Having that authentic audience piece, again, I don't want to sell that short in any way. That, to me, is one of the most transformative things about using technology in the classroom, is that you can reach other people with your thinking and with your writing and with your ideas. But really thinking through, am I doing something with this that I could not do in any other way? And how is this going to make a difference for my kids as learners? And so, again, always aiming for those opportunities to get above the line with your technology integration and to really redefine what's possible for your kids. So I'd really encourage you to try it if you're at all interested in doing some sort of collaboration like this, even if it's just with your colleague, you know, down the street in your district, or with somebody you met this week at ICE, because having that audience makes such a big difference. So I'd encourage you to reach out and have the students reach out beyond their classroom and expand their world as learners and as thinkers, and expand their reach also as authors, and really engage the kids in making work that means something to people outside of your classroom. It's a really powerful experience for young learners. So thanks so much for being here. Please feel free to stay in touch. And the URL, the bit.ly there, is the location where the slides are uploaded. You can also get a link there to our book, to Jane and Java's book, and to the slides where it shows how the sharing in Dropbox works, and that's narrated. So if you kind of forget and you're like, I don't know how to manage that, there's some resources in there to help you. And please follow my friend Ingvi on Twitter. He's a really great guy. Thanks for being here.